We're here in Startup Week in Israel with Clint Nelsen, who is one of the founders of the Global Startup Weekend organization. Clint, tell us a little bit about the organization and what its purpose.
So Startup Weekend's an educational based platform where the goal is to train entrepreneurs how to launch companies in 54 hours. And so the primary goal at the weekend event itself is for co-founders to meet other co-founders. So on Wednesday night here in Israel, what would normally be a Friday night at a startup weekend in most other cities, participants gather, pitch ideas, form around they collectively choose the best ideas, and then get to work. So it's strangers working on new projects, and a lot of those projects end up being sustainable, but more often than not, people meet a co-founder that they take with them long after the event, which is so hard to find good co-founders. So we try to bridge that gap by making that more intentional, of you're here to meet other people that are passionate about tech startups, and great relationships and stories come out of that.
So this was basically the problem that you came to solve. How this idea started?
So in 2007, Andrew Hyde did the first one in Boulder, and then about a year or so later, Mark and I bought the company from him, which at the time was a for-profit. We turned it into a nonprofit, which is unusual because we spent money on buying it as a for-profit and changed it because we just wanted to make it as accessible and as big as possible, because it's just changed a lot of people's lives, including our own, with how simple and disruptive that concept was. Of, the premise of the idea was get 100 or so smart people in a room and put them in a creative environment where they can pitch any idea, form into teams based on new ideas that are being pitched, and actually build something and do it in a small amount of time rather than talk about it. So the disruptive element is really working with strangers, trusting them quickly, doing things in a short amount of time, and actually working rather than talking. And so we put all those elements together, and people around the world have thought that's pretty cool.
So Startup Weekend is now global. You have over how many events?
In 2012, we'll do over 500 events, I think.
In how many countries?
67.
So in 67 countries, I'm guessing you must have been at least in a few of them. And what was I don't know if it's the weirdest, or, there are so many cultures, everyone do it differently. What was the most different or maybe inspiring thing you've seen when you went around the world?
Well, for one, Israel's different in that we don't do it on a normal Friday through Sunday. But there's been a lot of other places. I've been to Startup Weekend in Cairo shortly after the revolution, and that was pretty dramatic. People were really excited about feeling like they had starting to get control over their destiny, rather than kind of shedding that layer of corruption and that seemed to exist there. So that's been interesting. But a lot of people ask me that question all the time, and the shocking answer that I always give is the world's pretty flat, and especially with the web, information flows so quickly that we are all using the same tools, and those same tools all start and stop at the same points. And so most people around the world are thinking about, where does Facebook start and stop? How can I extend it just a little bit? Where does Twitter start and stop? How can I extend it just a little bit? Foursquare, all these other, Dropbox, we're all using the same things, iPhones, MacBook Airs. And so then, since we're all using the same things, we're also all thinking about the same problems associated with those devices and platforms. So oftentimes I hear the same ideas coming out of multiple different cities. And that really just serves to validate those ideas. If 10 cities are saying, hey, I wish we had a location-based file sharing service, then it's probably a really good idea to build that if it's been if that problem's been validated in, say 10 different cities spanning 4 different countries. There's a need there. So that's probably the most interesting part of, for me, of Startup Weekend is getting to hear the same problems pitched multiple times, because then it really just points out that it's a pain point for users.
Do you see any difference in developing countries? You see them, their way of thinking about things that are more survival oriented or less tech oriented?
The biggest gap in developing countries is like a place like Egypt, for example. Payments is a major problem. So oftentimes people have to go to the store to buy a prepaid card to transact on the internet. And so that makes it a lot harder to transact online than, say, PayPal or something like that. So that would be the major barrier, because then if you don't have payments, then you can't build really a lot of things, because most of the web requires a payment gateway of some kind to transact, unless it's like Facebook or Twitter or something like that. But so if you can't get customers to pay, that's a major problem. But it also presents a big opportunity for entrepreneurs that are building in those places, because of course that'll catch up. And then once there's ways to transact online, then that market really starts to explode, and smartphone usage and internet, time on the web starts to increase, because it's more provides more value to the consumer, because they can actually do things, because the consumer can now transact and get value in ways that they couldn't have done before. So payments is the big one, and so I see developing countries that don't have solid payment infrastructure, then they're also lacking a lot of localized services that cost money, like things like Dropbox. It's a $10 a month subscription in the US, and if I can't input my credit card, then that service doesn't exist. So they're really just behind on those kinds of platforms because of paywalls, I would say. And then once those start to get implemented, that starts to fall, and things start to get localized in those different.
And if you could give like 3 tips to entrepreneurs who want to start their own business, their own startup, what would they be?
First, so all 3 would center, well, the first one would center around team, and because team is so important. So finding good co-founders that motivate you in the morning to get up and work really long hours and make that project fun is the most important. Number 2, it would be focusing on minimum viable product. So not going, just doing things in the right order and demonstrating traction. So I guess, 2's MVP, and 3 would be getting users and generating revenue as soon as possible, because if that'll take them to one of 2 outcomes: either raising capital faster if they need that, or being sustainable faster based on the company's own revenues. So it's team, MVP, and users and revenue.
And number 4 is, of course, attending Startup Weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's worthwhile, even for existing teams, to just hear about what other people are thinking about in the marketplace locally, to kind of check in and take a pulse of problems that people are identifying, and meet some other smart people. Because pretty much everyone that comes to a Startup Weekend is identifying themselves as a free agent to work on an idea. So oftentimes it's just hard to find people that are in between jobs to even join a team. So it's a great place to pick up talent.
Okay, Clint Nelsen, thank you very much.
Thank you.